Couple more seconds, Jean. Okay.
Good afternoon and welcome to our latest Milwaukee Press Club Newsmaker Luncheon, minus the food, but we do have a fantastic guest for you and a great panel, plenty to talk about today. I'm Gene Miller, the president of your Milwaukee Press Club, and we thank you very much for joining us. We've done several of these Zoom situations, virtual situations, and we certainly appreciate your patience in these unusual times. Our mission, of course, is to keep our mission alive, and that is to inform the community. So to that end, again, thank you for adapting to the digital reality that we now exist in. We'd like to thank, of course, our sponsors, our presenting sponsor, Spectrum News One, our sustaining sponsor, Miller Koss, our event partner, as always, WizPolitics.com, partnering with the Press Club for this luncheon without the food as part of the ongoing event series that we do in Milwaukee, sponsored by UW Milwaukee, Wisconsin Academy of Global Education and Training, 1125 at Pabst, the Milwaukee Police Association, the Firm Consulting, and the Medical College of Wisconsin, as well as Spectrum. There you see all of our sponsors on the screen for you. Please do your best to support them in the days and months moving forward. Also, I'd like to put out a digital tip jar if I could. The Milwaukee Press Club is a nonprofit, and we usually do collect a fee for our newsmaker luncheons to cover expenses. Well, since nobody's eating and we aren't using the newsroom pub, that's not the issue, but we still could certainly use your support for our endowment committee, which provides scholarships to up-and-coming journalists throughout the course of the year. So if you'd like to do anything for us in that regard, we'd certainly appreciate it. Just go to MilwaukeePressClub.org. You'll see the little link there, and anything you do would be deeply, deeply appreciated. Our guest today is Senator Ron Johnson, first elected in 2010, now in his second term. He is a chairman on, or I should say, a member of several committees, chairman, most importantly, on the Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee, among other obligations. He is joining us from his Wisconsin home, fresh back from Washington last night. Senator Ron Johnson, thank you. Welcome to our Newsmaker Luncheon. If you have a few opening comments, go ahead.
Well, hello, Gene, and I want to thank the Milwaukee Press Club for inviting me. I wish I was there in that little restaurant. These are always fun events. And so I'll just start with my opening comments, talking about the reason we're doing it via Zoom versus socializing in a great little restaurant in Milwaukee. It's because of COVID-19. It is probably the most significant event in my lifetime. I think it is having a greater effect on individual lives, on our economy, on our federal budget, on our politics than anything since, I would say, World War II. And it will continue. We're going to have to learn to live with COVID-19. I certainly hope that we have effective therapies, that we develop a cure or certainly a vaccine as soon as possible, but we can't count on any of those things. And so I just want to, I guess, replay a little bit of the history to set us up in terms of what we need to do in the future. I was out there pretty early on, and I got pretty well excoriated in the press for having the temerity to actually say that, we tragically lose 36,000 Americans every year on the highway, and yet we don't shut down our highways. I think when all's said and done, we'll look back, and as much as Sweden's been criticized, that as any nation, they probably handled this about right. They quarantined the sick, did contact tracing, they protected the vulnerable, and then they allowed the rest of their citizens to carry on with their lives as the germaphobes as we've all become. Let's face it, we respect this disease. It is nastier than the flu. There's no doubt about it. I was hoping it wouldn't be any worse, but it certainly is. So we respect this disease. We're doing the social distancing. Most of us are. We're practicing personal hygiene. I think had we all approached that, we would not have had the economic devastation we're talking about that we're facing right now. And I don't think this would be as difficult a situation as we're currently in, certainly not fiscally or economically. I always rejected the overall shutdowns. People saying they were shut down or shelter in place, and then we're going to identify and list the essential businesses and keep everything else shut down. From my standpoint, every business, every organization is essential to somebody. What we should have done is concentrated on the non-essential businesses that posed a significant threat toward out-of-control spread. Remember, the goal of all these shutdowns was to flatten the curve so that we wouldn't overwhelm our healthcare systems. Now, New York came pretty close. Maybe other hospitals might have come the close as well, but in general, our biggest problem is we've underwhelmed our healthcare systems. We stopped doing elective procedures, and I like pointing out that one person's elective procedure is another person's life-saving treatment or diagnostic. And so I think it's important to learn, and by the way, I'm not being critical of elected officials having to make tough decisions with limited information, but we're gaining more information now. And I think part of the reason you're seeing a resurgence in cases is, as we have opened up, is we have so much pent-up demand for socializing and for carrying out their lives that I think people probably are putting themselves in situations they probably shouldn't. We are learning that probably the most dangerous place to be for COVID-19 is in an enclosed space, close to people, where people are shouting. We have the one case where there's a choir. Coronavirus can be aerosolized. And so that's a dangerous spot. So as we learn more about this, we need to take it seriously. We need to protect ourselves. We need to keep safe, but we have to truly understand the economic devastation, the human toll of that, try and minimize that moving forward and do everything we can to keep as much of our economy open up as much as we can, as safely as we possibly can, if we're going to really move forward. So that's kind of my opening statement, and I'm happy to entertain whatever questions people have.
Thank you so much, Senator. Let's bring on our panel of journalists from Spectrum News 1. We have Jason Fechner. Craig Gilbert joins us from the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel, and also Marty Michelson from WUWM 89.7 Milwaukee's NPR. We're going to start with Jason, then Craig, then Marty. We'll let you folks just rotate through. Be sure to ask any follow-ups if you have them. And without further ado, Jason Fechner, you get question number one.
Lucky me, Senator Jason Fechner here from Spectrum News 1. Appreciate your time here today. On the COVID-19 front right now, the markets have been in a sell-off this morning, at least before I had logged into the Zoom conversation with you here, in part because Governor Abbott installed new restrictions down in Texas. That flattened curve appears to be sliding back upwards in a lot of states right now, and especially across the country. On the economic front, at least, are you in favor of another round of stimulus payments to Americans if we reach a certain threshold economically out there? And would you be in favor of extending the tax deadline once again?
Well, first of all, I opposed the initial $1,200 stimulus payments. We didn't need stimulus. What we needed was financial support. And I think the reason we passed something so massive and so fast was a recognition that we had to come and provide financial assistance to workers, to businesses that were shut down through no fault of their own, but because of coronavirus, and we certainly need to provide liquidity to the market. The $1,200 payments, where were people going to spend that? We do not have an unlimited checking account. And so I still don't think we're at a point where we need stimulus. What we need is targeted, directed, and smart financial assistance. You know, PPP, it's not the way I would have done it, but I actually was pretty amazed at how quickly that money got dispersed through our economy, but it was a shotgun approach. And I think we're all recognizing an awful lot of businesses, organizations got PPP. By the way, we spent $500 billion of that. And that went to a lot of people that really did need it. Now, I'm not holding any of those folks accountable for certifying that because of uncertain times, they thought they might need that loan. I am a little concerned about the forgiveness of it, but that's kind of water under the bridge. Moving forward, what we can't afford to do is spend more money that's misdirected. So I'm highly concerned, particularly businesses and people at the lower end of the economic spectrum. For example, people that didn't have a banking relationship, never were able to get up to the trough, never got a PPP loan. Some of their savings have been wiped out. And that is, that is what we're going to need. We're going to need that capital. We're going to need that type of support. So those businesses that can be viable, once they can economically open up, we're going to have figure out something for restoration of capital, which is one of the reasons I proposed in my Wall Street Journal op-ed, some additional grants tied to employment, combined with debt, which is extremely cheap right now, but a debt burden that some of these businesses could actually shoulder if they had some grants. But then in exchange for that grant money, rather than just free money, set up some kind of or ownership structure, something around employee stock ownership plan. So we need to think outside the box. We need to take the stimulus or a lack of demand type of recession. We're still faced with a recession caused by an extraneous event called COVID, and we're faced with something entirely different from the standpoint of businesses being shut down through government dictate, and now because of the fear factor, because people have a rational concern about this disease, and they're not going to go to restaurants, they're not going to go to movie theaters, they're not going to go to gambling casinos. That's going to continue for a lot longer than any of us would like, but that's just reality, and we need to face that reality.
And quick follow-up on that, on the tax deadline front, you are in favor of keeping it July 15th right now in a few weeks.
You're kind of breaking up in terms of, the government's going to need money as well. My whole point is, in terms of financial aid to businesses and organizations, is absolutely. I want to be very inclusive in providing financial aid for those businesses that need it. But I mean, let's face it, most of our economy is open right now. So much of our economy we realized was essential. Now, I started out talking about, well, if we're going to keep grocery stores and hospitals open, we better keep all the, distribution businesses that are feeding those things. And we found out very quickly that a lot of our economy, most of our economy can remain open. But that doesn't mean that a lot of our economy is severely and significantly hurting. So we need direct support for those businesses. So I have no problem in having them delay their tax pay. Amazon is probably the prime example of prime. That's really not a pun, but that's a prime example of a business that's doing fabulous during the shutdown. They don't need any support. They don't need any kind of delay in their tax payments whatsoever. And there are thousands of, probably tens of thousands of other businesses in that same position. So let's target the relief. Let's be very inclusive and generous with the relief, so we can reopen our economy and really reclaim where we were prior to COVID, which was a record economy with record levels of unemployment across all demographic groups.
5 bonus points for the accidental pun use. Craig Gilbert, over to you.
Senator, what do you think the public schools should do this fall?
Open up. Yeah,
Absolutely.
One thing we've learned about COVID is if you're a young person, your risk of having a serious side effect of COVID is extremely low. That's a good thing. More children die of seasonal flu than they are of COVID. So the only risk in opening up schools is potential spreading disease, as much as we might have thought as well. So we need, again, understand the human toll of the economic devastation in keeping schools closed. Yeah, I know many schools try to do distance learning, but I think the results of that are coming in. It's not particularly pretty. So we need to understand now, by being away from that learning environment, and quite honestly, the toll is taken on their parents too, that have to stay home, and they can't return to the workforce as well. So I think it would be crazy not to completely open up our school systems.
And just to follow up, is there anything that you would like to have seen the president and his administration do differently in handling this crisis?
It's easy to Monday morning quarterback. I could take pot shots at all kinds of things, the $2.9 trillion relief package, but you had to do it massively, you had to do it fast, and so you knew it was going to be imperfect. What I will say is, for example, I'm involved in all these conference calls with FEMA and other government agencies and departments. I know that the men and women of those agencies are working 24/7, and they are faced with an almost impossible task. Demand for some of these PPE products to outstrip supply by 2 or 3 times. That is not an easy situation to deal with. It's an easy situation to criticize, but not criticize fairly. So I guess it's maybe my manufacturing background. I'm pretty understanding how difficult it is to quick ramp up manufacturing and supply demand that is just so overwhelming compared to your capacity to supply it. Again, Monday morning quarterbacking, and I'm really not being critical of whether it's the president or governors or mayors who had to take some really tough decisions. I think we shut down too much of our economy. I don't think we focused, like I said, on the front end, but where we should have really focused is on those Had we done that, far fewer businesses would have shut down. I think the financial aid requirement would be far less, and we'd be far better posed to continue to support those businesses as they have to remain shut down, because again, COVID's not going away. We're seeing that uptick. That's something we should definitely be concerned about. So I think we went too far. But as I also said early on, nobody wanted to underreact. We had to recognize the cost of overreacting, and the chance of getting it just right was zero. We had no chance of getting it just right, but in hindsight, I think we overreacted, and we need to factor that in as we move forward.
Marty?
Okay. Hi, Senator. Thanks for taking my question.
Happy to.
You bet. Do you think Wisconsin will see another shutdown if coronavirus cases continue to increase, or do you think masks will be required as some other states have mandated? What's your feeling about that?
Well, I still think, again, based on what I've read, masks are more of a courtesy, particularly if you're sick. Well, first of all, if you're sick, you shouldn't be out in public, and you shouldn't be, you should be confining yourself. So, masks are definitely courtesy. There's a fair amount of information out there that say they're not particularly effective at preventing you getting disease. They may be pretty effective if you were to cough or something, and you might be asymptomatic. So, I certainly wear a mask in any kind of tight social situation where I go to grocery stores, that type of thing. I think it's just the smart thing to do. I'm not sure mandates are necessary because, again, people are smart. They don't want to spread it. They don't want to, spread it to other people. I do think that we need to continue to concentrate on those businesses that represent an out of control spread. And here I'm thinking tightly packed bars. As much as I know that hurts people to hear me say that here in Wisconsin, that might be something we need to control. When you're in a bar, you're talking loud. Again, we know that coronavirus is aerosolized. That's not a very safe environment. So if we see a significant uptick, and by the way, we kind of hit we kind of started coming down. We're kind of flattening up. The last couple of days, I monitor this every day. We've had a couple pretty strong days of new cases. Fortunately, our fatality rate is continue to decline, although the last couple of days, a little bit uptick on that as well. So we need to watch this and monitor it very carefully. And we really need to focus on those establishments, those organizations that represent a real risk for out of control spread.
Do you think we'll see another shutdown in Wisconsin?
I hope not. Again, we just might, but again, the governor really needs to work with the legislature this time, unlike he did last time. But hopefully people will be rational. If we really do see a significant increase of cases and deaths, start focusing in where the science tells us, what experience tells us of the businesses and establishments that we need to modify our behavior and possibly shut some of those down. But a generalized shutdown, I would say absolutely not. We never should have done that in the first place.
If I could follow up, much has been made of President Trump's remarks to slow down the testing for coronavirus, implying that all these positive tests are making him and his administration look bad. What do you make of those comments? Was that just a joke?
I don't know. I can't get inside the president's head. What I do know is we've dramatically ramped up testing. I think I heard the president say we're going to surpass us at 30 million tests. We have certainly tested more Americans than any other country in the world. There's some countries that have done a little bit more on a per capita basis. Testing was a problem early on, but even there, I hate to be critical because this is a new coronavirus. You don't this isn't Star Trek where you say, computer, give me 300 million tests. It takes time to develop a test that actually works. I mean, we still test the market that are not all that highly accurate. So again, there's nothing easy about this whatsoever. But I do know that has been a main focus. It has been actually in many respects a success to deliver. And the one metric that people are always looking at in terms of are you testing enough is what is the positivity rate? And most experts say it has to be below 10%. In America, we are well below 10%. Example in Texas, but throughout America, we are doing what the experts say more than that testing in terms of that positivity rate, which is well below 10%.
All right, Jason.
Senator, shifting gears now, in the midst of the pandemic, in the midst of the recession, you've had countless protests across the country in support of the Black Lives Matter movement. Any issues of vandalism or violence aside from it, where do you stand in your support of Black Lives Matter? And do you believe that there are issues of systemic racism in law enforcement in America right now?
yeah, I don't think there's any dispute that there are some bad cops. And what happened to George Floyd was reprehensible, and you simply can't defend it. And those individuals need to be prosecuted to the full extent of the law, and I believe they will be. Is there a problem in law enforcement? I think there is, but by and large, I'm a real supporter of the men and women in blue. I've got a great deal of sympathy and respect for the fact that when they leave their house every day to keep us safe, to enforce the laws on the books, to provide the kind of security that any successful society needs, they're putting their life on the line. So I have a great deal of respect for that. And I also am reluctant to second guess, what happens in a particular situation. We see these videos, and again, I'm not defending what happened in Minneapolis. We saw a long enough video that was reprehensible. But oftentimes you see a little snippet, you don't see what led up to the adrenaline being produced and what happened before that in terms of what the final reaction was. So that's why you need due process of law. You need to give everybody a fair shake in terms of their due process rights. But again, let's take a look at what we try to do from a federal basis. Law enforcement is by and large a local and state issue. So what the federal government can do should be limited and is limited. What is so unfortunate about what happened last week in the Senate is Senator Tim Scott, Leader McConnell asked him to kind of lead this effort, perfect person to do it, took a look at what the House passed, understood there were some things that were objectionable, were controversial, would not pass the Senate, took those up, took an awful lot of the areas of agreement from the House bill, created his own bill, our bill, this is the Senate Republican bill, worked with the White House, and had something that, I don't know, is 50, 60, 70% of what was in the House bill. I'm not aware of anything that was controversial there, anything that was objectionable, anything that the Democrats didn't agree with, and yet they refused to even allow us to put that on the floor, subjected to debate and amendment. They simply wouldn't accept 50, 60, 70, 80%. It was their way or the highway. And by the way, that's been my experience there, being there 10 years, whether it's gun control or other issues, where there are areas of agreement. They refuse to work with us on that in these big issues and just reject it. And so we get nothing. And because apparently they would rather have the issue rather than make some marginal progress and get a result. I think that's very sad. But I think we also need to be very concerned about the anarchists, the radicals, the other people that have hijacked part of the legitimate protest movement and turned it into something it is not, and something that I think is very dangerous for America. The prescription of defunding cops, are you kidding me? Take a look at what we're seeing now, what was supposed to be the autonomous zone, what was it, Chaz, now it's CHOP, what's happening in Minneapolis, the results aren't pretty. We need to learn to get along with law enforcement, because if they're not there, there will be a void created, a vacuum, and vacuums are filled. And I don't think you're going to want to have to get along with what replaces legitimate law enforcement. And I think some of these, for example, in the nation of Chaz, they found out that the results are not very pretty.
Senator, during the House debate on the House bill yesterday, Congressman Grothman from Wisconsin disputed the idea that African Americans are disproportionately victimized in police shootings, and he said that critics of the police were racializing the issue in order to make white people feel guilty. Do you agree with any of that? And just more broadly, is policing, is there a problem with respect to racial bias in policing? And if there is a problem, how big a problem do you think it is?
It's hard to answer that precisely. I've seen the more definitive piece of research from the Washington Post. I've read other things, figures. Listen, we have not rid our nation of racism, not by a long shot, but we still have that goal from Martin Luther King of a society that judges people by the content and the character as opposed to the color of their skin. Now, do we live up to that ideal? No. But I think most of us try to. Is racial discrimination systemic throughout law enforcement? I doubt it. Are there bad cops? Yes. I do believe that the thing that good cops hate most are bad cops, because it makes them look bad. And that's certainly kind of what we're seeing in this current dynamic. So listen, there are problems. You know, our Constitution says in order to form a new, more perfect union. We're not perfect, but we're trying to form a more perfect union. Again, that's what's so disappointing about what Senate Democrats did on the floor of the Senate last week, not even allowing us to get on a bill that would help us form a more perfect union. They just rejected it and said, nah, we'd rather have a political issue rather than get a result that might make some marginal improvement.
Marty?
As chair of Homeland Security, what do you think should be done about the Seattle Autonomous Zone? President Trump mentioned bringing in troops to disperse it, but then he kind of backed off on that, I think. Well, what's your feeling about what should be done?
Well, I believe the first responsibility of any elected official, whether it's at local, state, or federal level, is to protect the safety, the constitutional rights of their citizens. Our inalienable rights of life and liberty and the pursuit of happiness. And we have a federal system. Again, law enforcement is primarily a local and state function. And so I think nationally, you look to the mayor, who, by the way, very disappointing in her comments when she was asked, how long is that region of Seattle going to look like this? And she said, well, who knows? Maybe we'll have a summer of love. Well, that summer of love turned pretty disastrous pretty early on. So she was not particularly interested in solving the situation. Governor Inslee doesn't apparently seem too particularly interested. So at some point in time, the responsibility will fall to the federal government. If state and local officials don't protect the constitutional rights, the life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness of their citizens, they're also U.S. citizens as well. It'll fall to the responsibility of the President of the United States. But I think we first need to give local and state officials every opportunity to fulfill their responsibility. And right now they are failing at it. It's very unfortunate.
As chair of Homeland Security, does the president ever meet with you on these issues like autonomous zones, tearing down monuments, or coronavirus?
I have not spoken to the president on this issue, no.
Okay.
Obviously, I'm talking to Acting Secretary Wolf and other members of the administration, but I've not spoken to the president on this issue.
Do you support President Trump's proposal for jail or prison time to those who vandalize or tear down federal property, statues, or monuments? He also mentioned flag burning should be penalized with jail time. What do you think of that?
Well, I believe flag burning, unfortunately, has been proven to be a constitutional right. So there'll be no penalties for that. I would probably pass a law to create a penalty. But no, we need to enforce the law. We already have laws in the books that are pretty stringent, quite honestly. And I think we need to regain control. If that means kind of throwing the book of some of these perpetrators, I think we should do so and hopefully regain control of the situation so we can provide that safety and security that Americans have every right to expect.
All right. Craig.
I think it's Jason, right?
I'll take
Jason.
it.
Jason.
Sure.
Senator, to that end,
Come on, be fair.
earlier this week, after what had happened in Madison Tuesday into Wednesday, Congressman Tom Tiffany called on Governor Tony Evers to resign. Your take on that, and do you think the governor should resign?
No, I would call on the Madison, the mayor of Madison and the governor to, again, protect the constitutional rights of the life, liberty, pursuit of happiness of the citizens of Madison. It's their responsibility. And the fact is that they let it get out of hand. So they got to control the situation. But I'm not asking anybody to resign. They'll be held accountable by the voters when their term comes. But right now they need to step up to the plate and responsibility.
Senator, the conservative Wall Street Journal editorial board wrote an editorial today in which they said, among other things, quote, "As of now, Mr. Trump has no second-term agenda or even a message beyond 4 more years of himself." Your colleague Chuck Grassley actually pleaded on Twitter for someone in the Oval Office to read that editorial. Why do you think the president has fallen behind in his race against Joe Biden? And do you share the sentiment of the Wall Street Journal editorial board?
I mean, you can answer that question with one word: COVID. Prior to COVID, because of what President Trump's policies and Republican policies, this is a joint effort here. We stopped adding to the regulatory burden. I think of any policy that President Trump and Republicans in Congress enacted, it was just that. It was reduce the regulatory burden and stop adding to it. That allowed businesses for at least 4 years to look ahead and concentrate on their products, their services, and just kind of breathe a sigh of relief that a new regulation wasn't coming down the pike, increase their costs significantly, or just simply put them out of business. And so that was the most significant thing we did. Then we have a more competitive tax system. So you combine those two policies with an economy that just wanted to take off, that had been held back because of overregulation, overtaxation, and that resulted in really a record economy across the board. Record productivity, record GDP, record levels of low unemployment across every demographic group, and then COVID hit. Like a totally extraneous event, and that's obviously put this administration and economy back on its heels. I'm hoping what the election will be about is an honest assessment of whose policies are best suited to, spur on the economy again, get us to as rapid recovery as possible. And we can take a look at it. We can take a look at what President Obama and Joe Biden did over 8 years. By June of 2009, by the way, we were already out of the recession, and then we just started growing at such a slow pace, and it took such a long time for unemployment to get to even reasonable levels. President Trump came in, again, with a slowly growing economy over many years, just slow, morbid growth, and stopped adding the regulatory burden, came with a great deal more optimism and animal spirits, and the economy took off record levels. If that's what the election is about, and that's what I would certainly recommend that President Trump run on, I think the choice would be pretty clear. I'd much rather put my hat on those types of policies that are going to continue what worked versus go back to what didn't work under Vice President Biden.
Do you think his leadership style and his rhetoric has contributed to his political erosion in this race?
Oh, I don't think there's any doubt about it. President Trump is a New York street fighter. That's who America elected as president. We're used to Wisconsin nights. And so I've certainly tried to counsel the president that, Wisconsin's a little bit different place. How you convey yourself, the tone you take is pretty important here. But I think that's, if there's anything that, other than COVID-19 that might be harming this president, is just, who he is. He's a New York street fighter. Now, his base loves it. And what I will say is that the people that supported him in 2016, their support has only strengthened over time as he has been mercilessly attacked by, so many in the mainstream media, and had to really weather and withstand a more than 3-year attempt to sabotage his administration, which really started the day after the election. And of course, more and more of that information is coming out. I'm amazed at how little press attention from the mainstream media is really being paid to the abuse. I mean, the utter abuse of the Obama administration officials high in the, whether it's the Department of Justice, the FBI, high levels within the Oval Office, the core team of the White House. In terms of what is being revealed right now, I think it's shocking. And I think the American people really need to pay attention to that as well. And it seems like Joe Biden was part of that. It sounds like Joe Biden was the one who decided to prolong an investigation into Michael Flynn, even though the FBI said we should stop that investigation. And he's the one that threw out the Logan Act. It does show that things might have been orchestrated inside the Oval Office with President Obama and Vice President Biden. That is shocking and needs to be fully investigated, fully vetted, and fully exposed.
When are you going to produce a report on your investigations?
Unfortunately, documentation still takes time. We don't have everything we want, and without all my eyes, but I'm really hoping to at least have an interim report on the whole situation in Ukraine, and the State Department and Blue Star strategies and, the possible corruption of that process, trying to be utilizing contacts in the State Department. I'm hoping to have something no later than the end of July, early August.
Marty?
Okay. The Wisconsin Election Commission has approved sending out absentee ballot request forms to 2.7 million registered voters in the state by September 1st. Some people are concerned that this will eventually lead to actual ballots going out in the mail and then ballot harvesting. Do you share those concerns?
Listen, I'm a traditionalist. I love voting on election day. In my current role, though, I almost always have to fill out an absentee ballot. So I go through that process, and that's a pretty rigorous process, and it's got all kinds of controls, which is a good thing. I am concerned about generalized absentee balloting. I'm certainly concerned about ballot harvesting. It was illegal in North Carolina, and we had an election overturned, but it's legal in California. It sounds like it'd be legal in Wisconsin. I think there's all kinds of possibilities for fraud and abuse, as well as just lack of confidence in the elections. When the election day is over and you still having to wait for a week or two for the final result, where a result on election day may be overturned 2 or 3 weeks later. I think that is in our election. So, I'm a traditionalist. I would like to see as much voting done on election day as possible, just from a standpoint also of having up-to-date information by the time you actually cast that ballot. Now, some people got their minds made up far in advance, but let's face it, in today's society, things can change quite rapidly. And personally, I personally wait to vote till the very last minute on a mail-in ballot, even because I want all the information. And that's another problem with the generalized mail-in voting.
Right. There's always an October surprise, I suppose.
There generally has been.
Anyway, Jason?
Senator, we had developments this week about the Democratic National Convention in Milwaukee, about what that's going to look like going forward. Your thoughts on the proposed Republican National Convention now? Do you think it's safe for that many people to gather together in one place to nominate the next Republican nominee?
Well, let me first say, here again, COVID is dramatically affecting something that could have been so positive for Wisconsin. It's just unfortunate we're not going to have the economic activity. And I would have to say kind of the fun of watching the DNC convention in Milwaukee. I don't know exactly what the Republican convention is going to look like. I know they're going to have an awful lot of the business meetings that sounds like still in North Carolina, and then some type of event in Florida. Again, I am concerned about increasing cases of COVID. I take this disease very seriously. I recommend everybody does that. But again, I also think that so much of our economy can be opened and we can operate it safely. So that's about all I can really say. I just really don't have the information on exactly what either party is going to really do.
Greg?
Yeah, Senator, with respect to your own political future, would either the loss of a Republican majority in the Senate or the loss of a Republican White House this November influence your decision about whether to either run for re-election 2 years later in the Senate or to run for governor in 2022?
Well, yes. I mean, whatever happens in November 2020 will affect my decision. The loss of the House affected my decision. My preference always has been, as I stated, 2 terms and stay home here. That's my preference. But I really felt the House, with the success we're having in the states, I thought the House was pretty secure in Republican hands. I mean, I guess silly me, this is a real problem when you assume things. And that changed my thinking to at least delay a final decision until after the 2020 election. So yeah, I mean, it's all going to be dependent on what happens in November 2020.
But in terms of how it would affect your decision, I mean, would Republican defeat make you more reluctant to not run again, or would it work the other way?
it'll affect my decision. We'll just have to see what the outcome is. I'm not going to tell you exactly what my thinking is right now.
Okay. Marty?
Senator, what do you think of John Bolton's book? And do you think Bolton will go before a congressional hearing committee?
Well, first of all, I haven't read it yet. I'm looking forward to reading it because I think it will be a pretty good insight into history. Put aside the feud between John Bolton and President Trump. I think there'll just be an awful lot of interesting revelations about what happened. I am a little concerned. I think the judge ruling on that basically said, go ahead with the publication because it's already in the hands of everybody, that there's really nothing you can do at this point in time. But the judge even said there's real concern about national security issues. So that concerns me, but it still doesn't reduce my curiosity, my wanting to read his perspective. I've always respected John. I agree with so much of kind of his policy making, not 100%. I think it is unfortunate to kind of the tell me or the basically violating his non-disclosure agreement. I find that a little unsavory. I'm kind of disappointed in John from that standpoint, but I am looking forward to reading his book.
Jason.
Senator, quickly back to 2020. This morning, Senator Lindsey Graham had said that he would like the president to show a little more message discipline and, quote, just make it more about policy than your personality. With that hope to retain majority control in the Senate that, as you mentioned there, could impact your own political future. If the president were to ask you for one piece of advice to try to win back the White House in 2020 and retain majority control, what's that one piece of advice that you would give the president?
Well, again, I would concentrate on what we need to do to grow our economy, to recover from where we're at. And I've given this advice. In Wisconsin, I said that there are two things in order to win and be successful in Wisconsin. First of all, Wisconsinites have to like you. And secondly, they have to think you care about them. Now, having spent some time with the president, I know he cares deeply about this country. I know he cares deeply, for example, about the African-American community. I've been privy to, I wasn't in the meeting with Tim Scott and those surviving family members of people that had been, had tragedies with police encounters. But, what I heard from that is you have an incredibly empathetic president, highly concerned and wanting to we had Jared Kushner stop by our Joseph Project down right there on Center Street and 55th. Jared Kushner is highly sincere. The only reason we had the First Step Act is because Jared Kushner and President Trump rammed that through the Republican conference. There was real resistance. That was going nowhere. It was dead in the water. But it was Jared Kushner, because of his own personal experience with his father in prison, had a great deal of empathy for anybody in prison, including members of the African American community. So these are sincerely held views, sincere empathy, sincere sympathy on the part of the president, people like Jared Kushner, members of his administration. And my advice would be, let the American people see that side of the president. He wants the best for this country. I realize he rubs people the wrong way. I realize that a New York street fighter maybe doesn't go over all that well with every Wisconsinite. But I also truly believe that President Trump, in his heart of hearts, deeply is concerned about this country, wants it to do well, wants every American to do well, and is doing everything he can to make that happen.
Craig?
Do you have a follow? Oh,
No,
so just to get back to the issue of voting by mail, the president has been so critical of the mail vote, MAIL. And I wonder, some Republicans have expressed concern that his comments about voting by mail could actually discourage Republicans from using the mail ballot. And other people have expressed concerns about just, the comments about rigged elections, that it's going to kind of encourage people to question the legitimacy of the election in November. And I wondered if you shared either of those concerns.
Again, my concerns about mail-in voting is where are the controls? As I said, I'm perfectly satisfied with the controls. I think that works well. But when you mail ballots to everybody, the potential for fraudulent activity, I think is actually quite high. It increases dramatically. And so what kind of controls are you going to put in place so you don't have, again, in North Carolina, ballot harvesting is illegal and we overturned a congressional race. In California, it's perfectly legal. It's apparently perfectly legal here in Wisconsin. I have concern about ballot harvesting. So if we're going to go down this path, I think it's incumbent on election officials and state and local officials to put in the kinds of controls so that the day after the election or a week or 2 weeks, because of the problems, because there weren't controls in place, that people don't have confidence in the result of that election. I'm less concerned about the rhetoric as I am about the reality of a massive mail-in ballot election that doesn't have sufficient controls, and where there will be, let's face it, there are reports of fraud. There is evidence of fraud. It doesn't get reported on, it gets poo-pooed like, oh, that doesn't exist. Now, is it massive? I would say not, but I think you increase the chances it could be pretty significant with massive mail-in voting. So all I'm suggesting is now is the time to put in the controls, because I think mail-in ballots are just a foregone conclusion with COVID. It's going to happen, but we need to institute the controls so that people have confidence in the election.
So with respect to Wisconsin, would you encourage voters to vote, use the absentee mail ballot if they're uncomfortable voting in person?
And I do it myself. And I think that's a system that has far better controls than just, again, generalized mail-in balloting. And by the way, I'm not an election official, so I don't understand all this, other than the need for proper control so that in the end, we're not questioning the results of the election. Or quite honestly, having to wait 2 or 3 weeks for the results to come in. I mean, we've got to, look what happened in Iowa in those caucuses. Again, that wasn't mail-in voting, but you see the chaos that ensues when you don't have a result on election night. And if we're sitting here 2 or 3 or 4 weeks later, now I remember the Bush election. That wasn't pleasant. That's not good for our democracy. So I think we should do everything we can to avoid that type of eventual outcome where the results of presidential elections are not literally known for weeks afterwards.
Marty?
All right. What do you think are the chances, Senator, of Joe Biden picking Tammy Baldwin as his running mate?
I have no idea. I'm not a political pundit, and that would be up to Joe Biden.
Who do you think he will pick?
I have no idea.
All right, I'm going to hop in here because we are coming up on the top of the hour. I wanted to get in one question from our audience. Congratulations to our panel. You seem to have answered everything else that was on the audience's mind. One question, Senator, what is your opinion of the desire among some to rename schools, take down historic statues, etc., because they believe those figures no longer are worthy of being honored or remembered?
Yeah, I think there's a legitimate concern, and there could be a process for taking a look at anything, but it should be a process. It shouldn't be a mob. It shouldn't be tearing these things down. I am concerned about erasing our past. I don't know a perfect human being. We obviously are not a perfect nation, but I think we're a phenomenal force for good in the world. And I think commemorating people can have a huge benefit, because a young person sees a statue and asks their parents, what did that person do? And understanding the history, the good and the bad, is actually a positive thing. So it always concerns me. We've seen this. We've seen the Cultural Revolution, and we've seen purges in other totalitarian regimes. It's not a good thing. I'm not into book burning. I'm not into the cancel culture or erasing history. I'd much rather confront history, I'd much rather discuss it honestly, the good, the bad, and the ugly, as opposed to just have mob rule just wiping out. And by the way, look at how ridiculous some of the results are. They're ripping down statues of abolitionists. Abraham Lincoln, who fought and had the Emancipation Proclamation, and they want to rip down those statues as well. Right now, a statue is actually paid for by former slaves. It was dedicated by Frederick Douglass. It makes no sense. So I don't like doing something in the heat of the moment without thought and without proper discussion and debate. But I'm absolutely opposed to trying to erase and purge America of its rich history, the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Senator Ron Johnson, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. While we didn't get to gather in person like we typically would for a newsmaker, this ability with Zoom allows us to gather on very short notice from different locales, as we are doing now, practicing safe distancing, really safe distancing. But that is the beauty of this situation. And hopefully we can call on you again as events warrant and do another newsmaker, because we can do these so impromptu, so on the fly. And we thank you for your availability and your accessibility. I'd also like to thank our panel of journalists, Jason Fechner of Spectrum News 1, Craig Gilbert of the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel, and Marty Michelson of WUWM 89.7 Milwaukee's NPR. Thanks as well to our presenting sponsor, Spectrum News 1, and our sustaining sponsor, Miller Koss, and our event partner, WizPolitics.com. They are partnering with the Press Club for this luncheon and several others throughout the course of the year, part of their event series here in Milwaukee, sponsored by UW Milwaukee, Wisconsin Academy of Global Education and Training, 1125 at Pabst, the Milwaukee Police Association, the Firm Consulting, the Medical College of Wisconsin, and Spectrum. We'll be doing another event that will be coming up on Monday with the organizers, some of the organizers behind the Milwaukee police protests. They have been continuous since the Floyd incident in Minneapolis, and we will have several of those organizers with us starting at noon on the same forum via Zoom. So please register at MilwaukeePressClub.org if you'd like to be a part of that event. Should be very special indeed. And once again, our digital tip jar is still out there. If you'd like to contribute anything to the Milwaukee Press Club to help us sustain and maintain our mission. We are a nonprofit. Nobody's getting rich doing this, that's for sure. But we do still have bills to pay. We're not spending a whole lot now because there's a whole lot to spend it on, but we're not making a whole lot either because there's nothing coming in. There are no revenue sharing opportunities or revenue generating events, as most nonprofits are going through. So anything you can do for us, we deeply appreciate it to help forward the cause of journalism and educating young journalists as well. Just go to MilwaukeePressClub.org. I'm Gene Miller, your Milwaukee Press Club president. We hope to see you Monday for our next Newsmaker luncheon. Until then, thank you so much and have a great, safe weekend.